This is Bilal Randeree. I'm in Edinburgh, Scotland, at the TEDGlobal conference with Rebecca Mackinnon, a co-founder of Global Voices. And, Rebecca, can you tell us a little bit more about the work you do?
Sure. Well, since 2005, after I co-founded Global Voices with Ethan Zuckerman, I've become very concerned and interested in the question of how do we preserve free expression on the internet, and how do we ensure that the internet really serves the needs of the world's people and doesn't just reinforce existing power of existing governments and corporations. And I've also done a lot of work looking at Chinese internet censorship and surveillance, in particular in the role that companies play in that. And so I'm just finishing a book called Consent of the Networked that's looking at the struggle for internet freedom around the world and what some of the obstacles and opportunities are in that. And what I point out is that sovereignty, which is control over our freedoms or lack of freedoms, used to be mainly the province of nation states. And now power is also exercised by a new layer of sovereignty that I call the sovereigns of cyberspace, which are a lot of these internet companies on which we depend increasingly for our communications, and which increasingly have power to enable us to perhaps change our political situation, that also can empower governments as well. And as we saw in the Arab Spring, digital platforms were very helpful to activists in Tunisia and Egypt and elsewhere. But also you have issues in a number of countries where the relationship between companies, internet companies, and the government can actually serve to constrain the empowering nature of the internet and can enable the government to sort of keep people's use of technology more or less, not completely under control, but within enough control that they can prevent being overthrown. And in China, you have the most extreme case of that, of course.
Thanks. Just going back to Tunisia, you did mention during your TED talk that some form of censorship has, come back in Tunisia, and the dilemma that exists now, as the fine line between censoring what people want, what's best for society, and how far that goes. In a case like Tunisia, where there was extreme censorship in the past, and it's opened up now. Going forward, how do you see this panning out? What's going to be the main issues to take in consideration? Yeah,
well, this is the challenge, is that in democracies we have a lot of debate going on about what should be protected free speech and what goes too far and what is harmful. And in the Tunisian case, there have been some Facebook pages blocked and some other content blocked because actually a number of citizens felt that it was too violent and it was harmful to Tunisian democracy. But other people felt that, well, if you put into place these censorship mechanisms, they're going to get abused at the first opportunity. And so there's a big debate, and long-standing democratic societies, countries that have been democratic for a very long time, don't have good answers for how you balance the need for security and stability and protecting children and protecting business on the one hand, with protecting freedom of expression and civil liberties on the other in our digital networks. That nobody really has good answers to this at the moment. And part of the issue, I think, revolves around making that relationship between companies and governments and making the mechanisms for deciding what gets blocked or how surveillance for law enforcement might work. That needs to be as transparent and accountable as possible if there are going to be these mechanisms. Because the most insidious thing is when censorship happens and people don't realize it, or they don't know how to have it changed, or if they're being under surveillance and the people who are doing the surveillance are not being held accountable. And so citizens need to be able to be clear about how this relationship is evolving.